he often works with subject matter that is from his immediate area, which is in Eldern, Iowa. And for some reason, the works develop layers of meaning and layers of color so that the mystery becomes very much through the painting. This is an area where he paints, where he grew up and he lives now, and he knows very, very well. His website is extremely interesting because it lets you know more about his background and focus. He has often been a demonstrator for IFs, and I am extremely happy to bring to Zoom Tom Christopher.
Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Hello from Iowa.
Yes.
New Mexico. New Mexico's a lot warmer than Iowa, I'll tell you that. It's about 40 degrees outside, and it looks like it might snow a little, but that's spring in Iowa. So thanks for having me. And today I'm going to do a little demonstration of a scene. This is the reference I'm going to be using. It's a pastel painting I worked up this week for this demo. It's about 13 by, I don't know, 16 or so. And it's on this gator board, which I use as a surface. And it's like a foam core, only it's stiff. And I ordered this online from a company called Uline. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's actually a packaging material, but it accepts water and a real heavy underpainting. So this is the surface I've been using now for the past 10 years or so. They claim it's completely archival, although I had to take their word for it. This is, I think, 3/16, and it comes in a sheet. I think it's 32 by 40 inches. So I just cut it down to size. As you'll see in the video coming up, I paint the surface orange or a warm color. It doesn't necessarily have to be orange, but I picked orange because it goes well with green, which I'll be covering with pastel. And I use house paint for the first coat. Actually, it's a mixture of house paint and gesso, so it is archival. And I do it with a dirty, stiff brush so I can retain those brush marks that you get with the stiff brush. So if you go ahead and roll the video, I'll show you how I use drippings to create the leaves and foliage that surrounds the trees and stuff like that. And also you could pick out rocks and little pieces that you could turn into sticks and stones and I don't know, tree stumps and branches. Anyway, roll the video and you can hopefully, if you have any questions, I'll be able to answer them after. For my underpainting for pastels, I am using an 18 by 24 sheet of gator board. To begin with, I have painted the gator board with a mixture of orange house paint and white gesso. As you can see, I have used a stiff brush to allow the lines of the bristles of the brush to show through. Next, I will begin sketching out the outline of design of the scene I will be painting. I am using a thin charcoal stick for this first step. As I continue with my design, I'm only concentrating on large shapes. I'm using very little detail, and this is a very quick, rough sketch. As I go along with this design, I'll be designating areas where I want to apply texture. I only use textures in certain areas. usually to direct the view to the focal area and to identify the focal area. I also use textures to depict detail elements like twigs and sticks that may be in the foreground. Here I'm using a dark value pastel to create a quick value study. I want to identify the darkest area and the middle tones and the very light areas right from the beginning. Keep in mind, I am very lightly applying this pastel, just skimming the surface of the gator board. I will eventually add water to this to soften the edges and finish the value study. I am applying water to soften the edges and complete the value study. After the value study is dried completely, I begin to add texture. For the texture, I simply use a stick, dip it into paint, and drip it onto the pastel painting. As you can see, I've taped off the area where I do not want the texture to be applied.
That's good.
After dripping is complete, I let it dry for a few minutes until the paint becomes tacky. And with a soft paper towel, I'll soften some of the lines. When these drippings have dried, I go ahead and peel the tape from the surface of the gator board. As you can see, the textures become more apparent now, and you can pick out areas that may be used for sticks and twigs and foliage. For the final step of this process, I use a mixture of fine pumice gel and water. I will apply this to the surface of the painting and let it dry. This mixture will create the surface for the pastel to adhere to. Fine pumice gel is a product manufactured by the Golden Company. I usually mix the fine pumice gel thinly with water and apply 1 to 2 coats on the surface of the painting. This completes my process for a textured underpainting. The underpainting that you just witnessed is not the one I did for this painting, so keep that in mind. That was actually one I did for the Ohio Pastel Society, but I taped it, so it gives you an indication of how I start my paintings. All right. As you can see, I'll be using this as a reference. This is actually a scene that's about 2 miles from our house out in the timber. We call it timber in Iowa. You call it woods or whatever. But it's a really wooded area, and there's very little traffic through here except for deer and some cattle. But it's heavily wooded. And a lot of these trees fall down and block any kind of entrance into the wooded areas. So that's where this is coming from. And I like the design of it, which caught me right away. And I think when I'm looking for an area to paint, the first thing that catches everybody's eye is the design and how it will look as a painting. So this one really caught my eye. So I did a few thumbnail sketches and photos, and then I started this outside and then brought it into the studio and finished it. That was earlier this week. So I'm going to move this off camera, and so I'll be able to see it as my reference. And behind it is the painting I started for this demo. It's actually the underpainting using the process you just witnessed. And I did add color to it, which I'll explain as soon as I get this off of here. With the video you just saw, you can see how I dripped some of the paint on here. And I also used a palette knife to scrape some paint on there. This is actually here it is. It's this paint I bought at Hobby Lobby. I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's a new product that's called thick acrylic paint. And it's a little more expensive, but it works well for this underpainting. So I scrape some of that on with a palette knife, and then I go ahead and drip some strings on here with that dripping method. After that was completely dried, then I did mix some golden fine pumice gel with water to cover it, to create that surface for the pastel to cling to. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and add pastel to this. When you're doing your underpainting, you can use about any color you want, because if you don't like it, obviously you'll be covering it with pastel. But leave some of these colors that are kind of maybe weird looking now, that create quite a flavor. And when you're talking about the colors that come out in my paintings, it's because of that, you know. And like Handel always said, if you have different colors with similar values, you go ahead and put them in and it won't become muddy. So that's a good point. And I've always remembered that from the classes I took from him. And he uses that all the time. So don't be afraid to use those colors. Remember the temperature, the cooler colors in the back and the warm colors in front. And then go ahead and have fun with that. This is kind of a nice little piece without any pastel. It's different, and it would definitely attract a viewer if it was in a gallery. So something to consider. When I'm applying pastels, I use Terry Ludwig pastels predominantly because I like the shape of them. And I always use the side of the pastel when I'm painting instead of the point. My strokes are very long and very light to start with. I know in UART paper, you could go ahead and apply a heavy stroke to the paper and it won't build up so much. But on this surface, you have to develop a real feather-like stroke when you're painting. And I leave the really heavy-handed marks for the end of the painting, like the last 10% or so. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. This is really strange talking into a screen, so you'll have to bear with me here. This is my third time doing this, and it's still challenging to say the least. So you're doing well.
Great, it looks fine.
Good, good. I'm gonna go ahead and start. I've separated my pastels. You can't see them here, but I've separated in values instead of colors. So I use my darks, middle tones, and light areas. And since I'm right-handed and I start with the darks first, I reach from the right over, so I got all my darks, and then I move to the left where my lights are. I do order a special pastel from Terry Ludwig it's pure white, and it has no pigment in it except for white. So a lot of whites you'll find will have some kind of warm color in it, like a red or yellow, but this has no pigment, no other colors added to it. So I use that in real specific areas where the light's just right. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with my darkest areas first. And according to my reference, which is off screen here, I'm gonna use not my darkest, but actually a blue, kind of purple for this dark area. Again, this is just a very light stroke. And this is not, by far, not my darkest color, so I can still go darker on top of this if I need to. And remembering that I can use various colors as long as the values are similar. This blue is going to work just fine, I think. And if I don't, I can add a darker color on top. Another thing that I learned from Handel was, instead of using my hands to I call it smearing the painting, I use a paper, soft towel, and just dab it. This takes the top layer of the pastel down a little and softens the edges instead of rubbing it in like this, which would fill up the tooth. Okay. I'm going to take another dark, which I have right here, and go ahead and indicate this kind of tree trunk that's coming through here. And some dark here. Again, this is very light. I'm hardly touching the surface here. Okay, it gets real dark down here where this tree is casting shadow. The light's coming from my top left corner here, so the shadows will be cast just lightly through here a little bit, with quite a bit of light right here. Okay, I'm still in my darkest darks here, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a few of these cast shadows just lightly. There's another tree right here, it looks like. All right. As I move farther into space, it looks like the colors get a little, I'm gonna go ahead with this cooler blue, but I'll probably cover it up or something. But I want to show a little distance in the background here. So I'm gonna start with this blue and then move into green just a little bit. By adding this blue first, then automatically the background becomes a little cooler and recedes a little bit. Okay, there's a little area back here. I'm not trying to stand in front of the painting, so maybe if I go like this, it will help. It's always nice to vary the pressure of your pastel when you cast in these long strokes. It gives it kind of a rhythm to it instead of just taking one stroke and going like this. I'm kind of different when it comes to putting the sky in, because I usually wait till the end to put the sky in. For me, it's easier to match the sky to the painting rather than starting with the sky and then matching the painting to the sky. Okay, that sky, or these trees aren't really that bright, so I'm going to calm them down just a little bit. I might let a little of this light come through. I'm going to step back and see how this is looking. All right. When doing these videos, you have to stand pretty close, so I have to step back to see how this painting's progressing. So I may have to step back every so often to see how this is going. I always tell my students too, if they like to sit and paint, then they need to get up every 15 minutes and back away from the painting. I think it gives you a better idea of what the painting's doing, and it gives you a chance to straighten areas that need to be straightened that you don't see close up, and just gives you the whole picture. Okay. Another thing I like to do is if I want to add a light into an area, I will start with a shade or two darker than what the final product's going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and put in kind of a dim light back here. That's way too light. Let me find something else. Yeah, let's go with this. This will work. Like I said, this won't be the final product, but I don't want that bright light to interfere with what's going on here. And by starting with a shade darker and move it into the whites, you gradually bring the light in rather than putting down a white and then going backwards. If that makes sense to anybody. But if I want to add a little more light, then I'll cast a little light and keep doing this and backing away until the light is just right. Okay. Oftentimes I see students, they'll make the sky white or either blue when they don't actually appear that way in real life. So this is one way to handle that. And I can always make that sky lighter if I want. Okay. Now here on this tree, I did apply this underpainting with a knife, a palette knife, and I could feel the textures in there. But after putting that pastel pumice over the top, it has smoothed it down quite a bit. So when I cast a stroke of pastel over it, I'll try this blue and just lightly do it. You can almost pick up the roughness of the bark on the tree. Does that come across okay?
Yeah, it looks good. You can see it.
Okay, but that's the idea with the textured underpainting. Again, you don't usually see a blue tree, but if the values are correct, you can get away with it sometimes. And it does make it an eye catcher for people when they're in a gallery walking by and say, well, that tree's blue, but it doesn't bother them too much. Okay, that's gonna actually move into the light a little bit. So I'm gonna bring a little of this light in. Again, I'm going a little darker than I need to. A lot of those branches have died and are just kind of hanging down here. Okay, there's kind of a bush or it's covering part of this tree here, so I'm gonna go ahead and indicate that just a little bit. But I think it's important if you're gonna do this process to keep your strokes very light and feathery. And let that texture pick up anything that might appear to be leaves or yeah. I'm gonna step back one more time here. Okay, I'm gonna add just a little bit of light to this to see how that's gonna react. This is actually a blue here, but if the value's right, okay, I'm gonna move up into the lighter area just a little bit on this tree. That might be a little too much. Let me find something that place. Here we go. That's my whitest white right there. I'm just use that kind of test it to see how much lighter I can go in. Go this light. This is kind of a yellow light. That might be just about right. Okay, with the lighter blue, I'm gonna just cast a little light in here, just very touching barely touching the surface here. Okay. That may be where the lights found its way into the dark timber there a little bit. Okay, this might be a little darker. I'm going to make this area just a little darker. So it kind of fades into this brush back here. Okay, got a little egg here. If you're wondering about my easel, this is actually an interior door that I painted. I think it's, and I got tired of an easel because I like to walk back and forth when I'm painting, and I kept knocking the easel over. So I just found this door and nailed it to the wall, and I've been painting on it now for 15 years, I think. So it was a cheap problem solved for me, I guess.
That's a great idea.
Pardon me?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. It's you know, and for oil paintings, I just simply tape the canvas to the board and then stretch it after I paint it. So it works out well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add some dark to this upper left quadrant here, and then I'm going to work on these trees. How am I doing on time? Is anybody keeping track?
It makes no difference. You could take as much time as you need.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that's something. I thought in Zoom you had to have some kind of a limit to how much time you
With slight limitations, it's the larger files are a little harder to transport back and forth between.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, I guess. These are really abstract marks I'm making here just to kind of fill in this area that may indicate some trees deep in the wooded area here. All right, I'm gonna go to work on these trees a little bit. I was kind of hoping that I could make one tree larger than the other, but according to my reference, they're pretty much the same size. So I'll have to make them different, maybe on how they play in here. One's a little curved, one's a little more straight. So we'll see how that works out. Okay. Yeah, I'm just using kind of a neutral color to get the idea. I wonder if, here it is. Use this brown a little bit down here. Again, this is very light strokes I'm using. When casting light on a tree trunk, I always start with a little darker. That's way too light. And then work up to the light areas. I have to apologize because I have to step back. I walk back and forth all the time while I'm painting, but this helps me, gives me an idea of what the painting looks like from a 5 to 6 foot area rather than so close like this. All right, another little tool I like to use is this stuff. It's called workable fixative. Can you see that? It's by Krylon. You can buy it at most stores. The idea behind this workable fixative is it's supposed to add tooth for your pastel painting, so you can add more layers of pastel. However, it really doesn't work that well. The only thing I'll use it for is to darken an area. So if I want to darken, let's say over here a little bit, I'll spray a little of this on it. Is that coming across as darkening the area a little?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, so it's a nice little thing to have here, and it does add a little more tooth to it. But it just changes the value and not the color, which is really helpful in some instances. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of this bark area. I gotta find a color that's not, here we go. This is actually a kind of a pinkish color. I just want to add some areas where the bark is peeled away a little bit. And this is just values. The darker values in the distance with a little lighter value on top. It's nice when you're making trees to let that branch go clear off the page. It gives it a little more life, and you don't get the stubby branches that we used to get all the time when we were learning to paint. Okay. There are a few little shadow lines that I can indicate just a little bit. You can get awful busy with these, but just a few would be okay. That's got a little light coming in right here. All right. Kind of let the star of the show to the very end, because that'll require a little more detail. So I'm going to go ahead with this foreground just a little bit. Again, I've got a lot of texture here that I'm going to try and make some use of. There's what we're looking for. Okay, I'm starting with a little darker value green here with a little lighter value on top. Lost, there it is. Again, with this light stroke, you can go over areas that you've already put down just to create a little motion, rhythm, I guess. A little step up in value. One of the reasons why I went with that warmer texture is with these greens, it breaks up the greens a little bit. And red, this warm orange goes so well with green that it helps to break up that, especially when it gets summer here and everything's so green. We'll add a little bit of light right here. Okay, I'm going to create a couple little boulders here, and that's going to be nothing more than a couple of strokes where the might be some field stone or rocks here. Just something to kind of lead you to the star of the show here. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead with this lead singer here. Again, I don't want to go too light too fast, so I'm gonna have to find it darker. So quiet out there. People still out there?
We're still here. See, probably see
Okay.
their voices. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they're all muted. It makes it kind of strange that I'm used to demoing when people are talking, so
Right.
it makes it a little weird.
If you don't mind answering a question, somebody asked what kind of paint you use for the drips.
For the what?
For
The drips?
original drip.
Okay, it's this paint right here. I buy it at Menards, house paint. I found that the paint right out of the can has better drips, so you got to make sure that you seal the can up. Otherwise, it kind of dries out and gets kind of globby. So, but yeah, I buy the cheap, usually not any particular brand, just what's on sale. But as long as you're using it for underpainting, you could use just about anything. I know some people have used this technique for oil paintings, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the more time you spend on the underpainting, the better off you're going to be in terms of getting your mistakes done early and correcting them with underpainting and your drawing. And it's just the pastel is kind of the icing on the cake for me, I guess. A lot of texture on this trunk that I'm going to try and work in as bark here. Okay, I'm going to move up in value just a bit here. Here I'm applying quite a bit of pressure. Okay, there's a nice be about right here. Whoa, that's a huge mistake. Okay. All right, I'm going to add a little more white to this area up here. Just with a blue, kind of where the light's poking through here. a little bit. As you can see, by adding that blue initially to this back here, it's created kind of an atmosphere where this recedes a little bit. Can you see that? I don't know if that's coming off on the film, but or on the Zoom, but
Yes, it shows up.
It comes
okay, it creates a little distance, and that's what I wanted to show as well.
It's a good idea. Looks good.
All right, I'm gonna put a few little rocks in here. Then I'll probably call it good. I don't know how long I've been working on this, but I don't want to bore everybody. All right. Does anybody see anything I need to work on here? Because I'm getting close to, if there's anything you want me to show you how to do, or is there something you want me to go back over?
I think it looks great.
It looks good. We had one person that wanted to know how to get your DVD. It seemed to be sold out. So they wondered about that.
Boy, I tell you what, if you want to email me, I'll just ship one out because I've got a few left at home. But they're all sold out they've been sold out for quite a while, I think. But yeah, just send me your email and I will ship it out to you.
Okay, I will send, or we'll send that out to everybody what your email is, because I think Betty, one of our Bettys was wanting to know that. She was trying to find it. Tom, she wants to see your the way you have your pastels laid out.
Okay, they're all mixed up now, but I'll just dip you down here a little bit to where I have them. I had all my darks over here, all my mediums here, and now they're all mixed up. Now my medium tones and then my lighter tones here. Well, let me see if I can dip this down to where they're at.
There
Can you
you go.
see that?
There.
A little bit now,
Okay.
yeah. we can see the ones you're using.
Yeah. But that's how I start out. I just do it by values. The darkest value to the right and the lightest values to the left, because I'm right-handed. And since I always start with the darks first, I'll just put all the darks clear to the right and then work my way left. It'd be the opposite for a left-hander, I'm sure.
Yeah. Also, Stan wanted to know about the trunk shadows on the foreground.
Right here?
I'm not sure where. He just asked about what about trunk shadows on the foreground?
Yeah, I don't know what he means by that. Some of these shadows aren't coming through because I've sprayed it, but I can redo some of them. I'm not sure what he's getting at, but yeah. I'll have to step back and look. There's a lot of light coming from the left, so depending on where the sun is, if it's up here, it won't cast much of a shadow on these trees, maybe a little bit. But if it was lower in the horizon, then you'd be getting some long shadows. But this time of the year, the shadows aren't quite as long as they would be like in the middle of winter. I'm not sure if you suggest the shadows should be clear over here or. But any other questions?
Oh, I think it looks great. Thank you.
Well, I think it gives you an idea of what it's like here in my area of the world, where the timber is really thick and gnarly and hard to walk through.
Lots of green, right?
Oh yeah. And yeah, in the middle of July or late June, it gets so green that I can't even go out to paint. I mean, it's just everything. But I think when working with greens, if you get all your greens and use them all, it will help break them up some. But greens can be really a challenge. And if you can mix some warmer tones with it, like these hints of red or orange or warm colors, it will break up the solid greens that you get a lot of times.
Right. We had another question. They want to know how you get the fine lines of the branches with such a large pastel stick.
A lot of that is underpainting. It's where I drip those paints. When I was painting in oils, I had that idea that I was going to be a wildlife painter. So I bought these really fine brushes that only have 1 or 2 hairs on them and tried to draw those lines that you get kind of like this.
Right.
So I thought to be more impressionistic, I'd use drippings to get those lines. And it seems like when you try to draw a line like that, you render it and it becomes tight. So I think this loose idea of letting those drips take care of that and then lightly cast over with pastels will create that kind of sensitive line. Does that make sense? Or?
Except the branches on your tree, they're
Oh, these?
pretty fine lines too for a tail.
Yeah, I use the sharp end of the pastel for that. That's about the only detail I'll do with the sharp line. And they are sharp. And if it gets worn down, I just break them in half and use that sharp edge. So yeah, there is that too. But I think the mixture of colors, when you look at this up close, all you see is color and lines. You don't even see the shape. So that's why I have to back off. And I usually go back about 5 to 6 feet and look over the painting. And I would suggest that to anybody that's painting landscape. If you want to create that impressionistic style, if you're into nothing but detail, then of course you can stay close to it all the time. But when I do that, it avoids me from just staying in one spot too long. So if I would spend all my time right here, then this would become real tight and rendered looking rather than more of a whole picture. So that's something to consider when you're painting.
Even doing detailed paintings, it helps to back off because sometimes you see something you're missing when you're up close.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I just think it's a good practice and I think everybody should do it.
What are you using to pat down the pastel?
This is just a paper towel.
Paper towel.
Yep. Comes.
Is it Viva?
Viva is the only brand. Yeah.
Okay.
That's another Handel trick that he always says, you gotta have Viva towel. I said, I do. Yeah. I said, okay.
Yeah, they don't have limits on them. That's right. They don't create.
Yeah. Yeah, he's big on Viva towels. One thing that I need to avoid is picking away at a painting, which I tend to do too much. So I think I'll let this sit for a while, and I don't know, I may post it on my Facebook if you want to see the complete version, but it's pretty close to being finished.
Yeah, I think it looks finished. I would think most of us would agree.
Yes.
Looks great.
I like the purple on the one side and then coming over to the other side. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it seems to tie it all in together.
Yes.
I am selling my demo and my reference photo. I think I'll sell this for $400 and the demo for $250 if anybody's interested. Only for your society. That's not for everybody. If I were to put this in a gallery, it'd be a lot more. So something to consider.
That's so kind of you. Anybody that needs to.
But if you're interested in this painting, just send me a email and say that you saw the demo, and I'll ship it up to you. I think this one's 18 by 24.
Thank you.
Thank
But I had a
you.
lot of fun painting it, so it was well worth it for me.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah,
That's very nice.
there it is, sort of. Well, thanks for having me. I hope this
Thank you.
helped and gives you an idea of what I'm about and how I do my pastel painting.